Hello, I'm David McMillan. I was a smuggler for nearly 40 years, and that involved prison, which I took on the chin mostly. But sometimes it just doesn't work out. They're too serious. Bangkok was one of those. And execution, or near enough to it, 2 weeks away, I had to leave. And that meant, when it comes to prison, escape. A prison becomes something utterly different when you step out of the line, when you leave the cell unauthorized. And also in a very physical way, it's different. On this night in August, it was around the 26th, I think, I didn't get out of the cell until after 2 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because everything was so much, I never really accounted for it. I knew it was going to be quiet. I wanted it to be quiet. But the sound everything makes is so loud in a quiet place that even the rasp of the tungsten blade that was very carefully smuggled in going across the old iron bar was so loud. It was like a violin bow takes old catgut and makes a loud noise out of it with the sound box. It was as though the whole prison building was a sound box, and when I drew that blade across, well, it just couldn't be done quickly. But having spent 2 years in there and pretty much been on every ride in the place, and I'd gone out of my way to seem like I'd settled into it, that I was still going to court. I hadn't been convicted. But it was a death penalty case. But there were quite a few of those, so the guards didn't make anything of that particularly. I paid my way, I had a little office. But everything changed when I had to go. All that adaptation and having my laundry done and organizing things in the place and food, nothing mattered except the preparations that I'd made. I'd rigged out the cell so that I could get up to the window, the furniture, such as it is, like a little footstool and a chair. They became part of a climbing ramp that went up to the window. But despite all of the preparations there, including a bookshelf that became a plank to jut out of the third floor window, because they didn't trust foreigners. They always housed them up on the top. Nobody had ever successfully escaped, but still, people get ideas. And in fact, I think a group of Thais that actually got out of the dormitory window, they discouraged any of that kind of activity. They beat them to death slowly over 3 months, kept them in what they call the soy box. It's really like a half-size coat locker. They dragged them out for a daily beating. They had a bowl of rice every day and half a bottle of water and a paint tin, which was the bathroom. So there was enough to put people off, but when facing a death penalty, or even living on death row in Thailand, being chained actually literally to a wall, waiting for the machine gun execution, that escape plan, so many prisoners have them, they dream about them, they have the details, but this one had to be real. What changed it into something of simply planning? I'd even had a matchstick model of the prison, so sketchy I didn't really know the layout. I'd have a matchstick model near my desk hidden, but I could just see it as empty space. There were so many parts missing. Klong Prem, you can see it on Google Earth from the air. It's huge. Even today I've only come to know that it holds 22,000 people. It's like a city within a city. It has its own economy. There are shops that the prisoners run. Most of the hands-on guard duty stuff, pushing prisoners around and getting them to counted and where they should go, that's all handled by the prison trustees. Untrustworthy bunch if ever there was one. And I had a cell full of them just below my cell, so I had to be careful there. As I say, it took a lot longer to cut out of the bars. The plan was working all right. I'd just made it. My bookshelf went out. I had 100 feet of nylon webbing, which came from the army boot factory, to scale down on, which turned into a vaguely controlled slide where I burnt my hands. Bear in mind, I'm well set up. I've got people around me that help and do things and run our little office downstairs in one of the workers' huts. The cell is limited to only 5 people, none of whom, apart from the Swedish guy, knew that I was going anywhere. But what I'm saying is there was a whole life in there, and I suppose from some people would see it that I lived very well. The moment I chose to escape, all the rules went out. The moment I cut that bar, that was all over. There was no going back. There was an informer in the cell who would have squealed his head off come morning. Absolutely for sure. So there was no dragging it another day. After 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was stuck with what it was. And the change happened as soon as I squeezed through those bars and then turned around and looked down, because it was high up, into my cell, my former cell. It was like these people were all strangers to me now. I don't mean that I didn't really know them and know them well, but it didn't count on the night. It's the worst thing you can do to a guard. It gets to their heart, their job. That's their only function, is to keep you in there. When you throw that against them, even the movies, I'm sure they react badly to it, but there's some sense, I guess, in the Western world that, prisoners will try to escape from time to time. There is no sense of that in Asia. This is spitting on them. It's an insult. It's terrible. That's why they always kill the person who tries to do it. But outside that bar, the bars that I just squeezed through, when I turned around and held on, I was no longer part of this prison world, not this huge structure with all its ways and little shops and industries and fixes. I was like some mythological griffin or something that had flown down on the wall of this old building and was clinging on, looking at these strange creatures inside, my former cellmates. And left some cash I had so that the worst of the treatment for them wouldn't be perhaps so bad. When I slid down to the ground, wonderfully alone. I mean, some people, they like company with these things. They want somebody for reassurance. They might want help at some point. Help is talk, and talk is noise, and there can be none. Because very quickly I realized that all my timings, all my imaginary plan for how long things would take, that would mean nothing. Because even walking to when I had my little office, we'll call it that, was in a hut that was one of the factories, and this was the artist's place. They did kind of drawings for sale in the prison shop outside the front. Even that took many minutes because I was being careful, not really looking about and stopping. That you don't have time for that. Not there, not anywhere. An old jail identity, I'll call him, once told me as we were peeking our head around some place we shouldn't be. He said, "David, when you stick your head out, don't look around to see if somebody's watching. The moment your head comes out, you're either caught or not. It's not going to make any difference. What are you looking around for? Like you're going to think of something good to say? Yeah, sure, boss. I'm out at 3 o'clock in the morning with an armful of tools, but, let's not think anything of it." And this changed dimension, that I was already an alien to this world of people that had no connection with me, people that would only suck me back in and bring about my end. That was worse by the whole sense of time being changed. I'd actually left the padlocks to my locker in the factory open the night before because I didn't want the extra time of having to open them up. It would save me also the noise of opening them up. You'd think there'd be no noise in just opening a padlock, but there was a noise in everything. I had to very carefully open it because some of the guards used to sleep around outside in the cooler air on the grounds in the yard there. Loathsome trustees used to make up their bed and give them a massage before they retired for the day. Then collected 8, I think it was, at least, picture frames, heavy things they were going to form the struts, the rungs of my ladder. And I had to get into a factory to find the place to do that. It was where they kept the long bamboo poles. So there was much to be done. I had a little knapsack and a bottle of water and some clothes and a couple of very simple tools. I had a Swiss Army knife I managed to keep somewhere and a S-hook for God knows what. But the important things, which were the very strong gaffer tape that would hold any two things together that weren't wet, and cable ties doing much the same thing. But the cable ties had another function. The panel, the open side door to it that would allow me normally to climb into the factory, had been given a sheet of plywood, and the nail just didn't want to come out without protesting and squeaking into the night air. I imagined that I heard the breathing of one of the guards as he slept over in one of the gardens of the place. I don't think I could have. Perhaps it was my own breath that was going. Because every move was a lot of carrying and lifting. I got into the factory with the long bamboo poles, which I guess were about, they'd be 3 meters. Doesn't sound like much, but it's long enough when you're trying to put two together with the thick end going one way and these picture frames in between, and then having to tape them up. I dragged these 2 ladders down through the old prisoner's kitchen area, which is nothing but rubble and a couple of 44-gallon drums with grill plates on top and charcoal that was used. Hooked over the first wall. But it was still too slow. It must have been maybe 3:30, getting on towards 4 even. I knew I had at least 7 walls to get over. And even one involved getting another bamboo pole, taping up this little S-hook that I had, and then some of my precious rope, hooking the rolls of barbed wire that went on the top of this, the inner walls of the prison, pulling that down, anchoring that, then getting my double ladders and putting it against the wall, running up to the top, pushing my weight down to the other side, dragging it over. That system would not work. Again, it was fortunate that nobody did agree to join me, because every step of this would involve stopping and a hushed, whispered conversation, which would have been, a disaster. It would have been so late. So much time would have been taken by these pointless conversations. I found that the system that worked best was to keep the 2 long ladders taped up together, carry them in the center of their weight, lope across the ground, come to the next wall, prop it up, climb up, let my weight again push it down, drag it over. I could feel the barbed wire on the top. Yes, it was tearing at this bamboo ladder, getting caught on some of the struts and rungs, ripping at my gaffer tape, but I had a big roll of it, so I could repair that if necessary. Ran across a couple of nighttime obstacles that I didn't see. One section was really fenced off from another by a wire fence, row and row and row of barbed wire, but I just couldn't see it until I was right on top of it, and my ladder got sort of tangled up hitting the base of it. Had to climb under that one, and you don't debate about whether, I'll get very dirty doing this, or is this good or bad, or how I fix up looking like covered in mud from head to foot. Wherever there's a path through, you take it. Though I was truly lost a couple of times. I found myself in the wrong buildings, but when climbing back up with the ladders to the top, I could just see the outline of the guard towers, which were the highest sections outside. The outlines of those towers, which I knew the main outer wall was there. After I got past the field, some pausing. There are guards out there somewhere. Not every guard post is unmanned. But I knew I was getting vaguely in the right direction, because I could smell the AIDS ward. This was back in the late 90s. And even though they had a few cameras around, nobody looked at them. But the AIDS ward You could smell the stench of the rotting bodies. They were alive. Not only the smell, but I risked looking inside the open but barred window of the AIDS ward, and a couple of the little, well, what colour was it by moonlight, I suppose, bleached pig skin or plucked chicken looking face, alive by some means, dying and in pain with the effects of AIDS, and thank God beyond caring whether they should inform of the strange face through the moonlight. And clearly they were beyond any such earthly interest as that. And from there, around 2 other buildings to climb over and an open field, and finally towards the wall, the last wall. I'm expecting all sorts of things there. I'm thinking, okay, I can just put the ladder up against it, climb up to the top, watch out for the electric current going through there. But I couldn't get to it. There are 2 things. There was an inner kind of moat. It was actually called Marsbar Creek because it was bobbing with turds. It was the inside sewer. And that was not even, I wasn't being picky about not wanting to go through sewerage, apart from that later on I knew I'd have to travel in the back of a taxi or something, and so I didn't want to be reeking of shit everywhere. Used the last of my water to clean myself up. I looked like a mud puppy by then. Put on some long pants, because they didn't allow the prisoners to wear long pants in there, because the guards wore long pants. Grown-ups did. Prisoners were not allowed to do that. I got to the top of that wall, just about got over the electrical part by holding onto the insulator and sliding my foot under the top of the wall and lifting myself very slowly, the only time I wanted to be slow, over the other side. And actually from sweating, just from sweating, there was enough tingle of electricity so I could feel the current passing by through me. So I had my last little section of rope, slid to the ground, and I was free, but not at all. I still had a 30-meter big moat, the proper moat, the one you can see on Google Earth surrounding the place. And the plan was to put my clothes into a plastic bag, tie that tight, swim across that, get up the other side, dry myself off with the towel that was in the plastic bag, get dressed and go on. But there wasn't time for that either, nothing like it. I could see dawn was coming, the light was creeping up. I had to go round by the front. I knew the front was somewhere around the perimeter. You will always come across the front when you're on the perimeter. And I popped up an umbrella. Because it was raining, I didn't like to get wet. No, I had a little, quite small pop-up umbrella from the umbrella factory, which is one of the places I notionally worked, though somebody else did my work for me. I had to hide my white face. Already there, I'd become used to the idea of being, well, what do they call the Europeans who ended up in the Thai prison? White trash. Even so, as I moved forward, I risked a couple of little peeks under that umbrella just to see who was in the towers and who was watching. And I stopped doing that because one guard looked down, and you can't see a frown, you just sense that he's wondering who it is. And round at the front gates, there was a side path so good I could get over that way. And I did see the familiar, was it a familiar face? I don't suppose it was. I mean, I knew my own guard, as it were, the one who worked in Building 6 where I was, the one who took my ATM cards and for an honest 10% took out some cash for me every few weeks. He was coming to work, and what did he see of me? Nothing, a face covered by an umbrella, some legs walking along. But I think even in the way we move, when people are familiar with each other, we know the way they walk. There was and there still is, I think, a pedestrian crossing bridge, a footbridge, that goes from the Klong Prem prison side over that big 6-lane highway that goes airport, Bangkok City the other way. I stopped at that to look around, to see as much of I'd never really seen the prison properly from outside. It had been prison escort vans. I turned around to see it, and again, it was no part of my life anymore. I did think, though, why do they stay? I didn't know it was 20,000. I thought it was about 12 then. But I thought, over 10,000 people? Really just going to be dying in there, slowly dying, running out of money, long run out of friends, family in despair, lost everybody they care about who's already lost them. But I didn't have time to look back for too long on all of that. I went downstairs from the footbridge, took two taxis, went to a location I didn't know other than the address, went up to the flat, and why am I doing this? Why am I not running to the countryside or taking some evasive action or already at the airport? I'm doing this, of course, because I don't have a passport. There should be a passport waiting for me there. I had the key that I had to break in a balsa wood key tag, which I had hidden in there. And the reason I had the key hidden in there is because if I was caught, they'd want to know what this key, what's it for? Who gave it to you? What's there at this place that you have a key to? And all of these questions would have been asked in a way that would have been hard to refuse some kind of an answer. So that was hidden. I let myself in and, as advised, went to the little cubicle toilet at the side of the small flat, locked the door, and felt behind a mirror there. Not a cabinet, just a mirror somehow nailed onto a wall. Oh, and behind there, what is it that I'm seeking? This passport. Why do I feel that it's there? Oh, because somebody told me it would be there. Who was it? Another jail inmate. But David, I hear you say, didn't you just get through saying how you could really not rely on anybody from the crook world? Well, Charlie Yao, a Laotian guy, really a cook by trade. And why should it be there? Because I've given him my old radio operator certificate and a picture in there. And he's transferred it into this passport. Has he? He should have. It needed to be stolen within the last 3 weeks because I've got to use it in an hour out at the airport. And is it there? Against the odds, it was. I didn't waste any more time looking at it too closely. Left the flat, left the key, headed to the airport. Where does a foreigner go when he escapes prison? I thought they would know by then, would react by then, would do what sensible thing. I knew that Thai prisoners don't like to report them straight away, but they do get going and visit people's family and friends. But a foreigner has no family and friends, so he'd be going to the airport. So that's where I would expect them. So it was a very nerve-wracking time as I collected a bit of money from the ATM. But the ATM didn't pay out what I hoped. Only one card worked, so I could only go a short distance. And all the countries that I could go to were countries where there was a similar death penalty and where extradition was not such a formal procedure. And Singapore was the only place that had a flight close enough to, like, now, that I had the money for now, that I could go to. But I managed to get onto that. That passport had checked out. It was good. It worked. I got on board that flight, and after a short delay, the satisfying sound of that door closing. Landed about an hour later in Singapore. I'd had an hour to look at this passport. It didn't come up so well on examination, not if you're nervous about it. The stitching on it was bad. It was supposed to be of a 3-color stuff. It wasn't really like that. It was kind of plain. My picture had been a photo of a photo, so that wasn't in great shape. And when I handed it to the immigration officer at Singapore's Changi Airport, unfortunately, he didn't like it any better than I did, or not much better. That photograph that was in it looked a bit rough. And he put it under the ultraviolet lamp. All the markings in UV reflective ink were on that passport, and I got through. I was a free man in Singapore, as far as I knew. Still a couple of taxis, a middle-level hotel. If you're on the run, do not go too high. Don't go 5-star. Why? Because the people who stay in 5-star, some of them have got their own security. Some of them might be visiting politicians or people of importance. Their security will want to know who else is in the hotel. Nosy people. No, and you don't want some place that's too low rent, full of shysters and schemers and people desperate. They will see some foreigner come in and think they can clean them out. You become then a target, a person of interest for a different way. Something middle and boring, 3 stars, maybe 3.5 at a stretch if you're feeling like a bit of comfort. But this was the one that I found. In fact, it was called the City Hotel. Nice generic name for that. Checked into there, completely exhausted, but in time to just buy myself a pair of swimming trunks and go to the top floor where you'll find the City Hotel has its swimming pool, and dived straight into the clean water and swam under the water to the other end of the pool, raising myself out. Instead of raising out of the tangled moat and the rotting strips of old detritus from Marsbar Creek, I was baptized, I was refreshed from the edge of that swimming pool. Walked to the edge of the railing, again turned around and to look back as a stranger in a strange city, let the wind dry me a bit and looked to the hills, and knew from then that I might have made it through that pool, but I had to keep moving on, which I did, silently. This advice is the most sound I can ever give of over 40 years causing trouble and receiving it. Never say anything to anybody about anything unless you have a very clear purpose of the effect of your words. Almost nothing is ever worth saying. Keep that in mind.